How do you prepare for a job interview? If you're like most people, one of the things that you'll do is you'll think of questions that potentially you will be asked, and you begin to rehearse some of the answers that you will give. Now, this is a great method, and I absolutely think you should do that. However, there is one thing that we forget to observe and think about, and that is our body language. Today in the episode, I want to explore body language mistakes to avoid at your next job interview. In any job interview, those who are interviewing us are very curious about the answers that we give. However, our nonverbals are also incredibly important because they send a signal, they send a message to the other person. And whether they're aware of it or not, they're also receiving this message and making a determination and an impression about you. So in today's episode, I want to give you 7 things that you should avoid when it comes to body language so that you're making the impression you want in your job interview. When it comes to our job interview, it's the first impression that very often is incredibly important. And the first 5 areas that we're going to explore all fit together in making an impression. And therefore, it's incredibly important with each of these 5 to avoid mistakes and that you're signaling something that you don't intend to. The first of these is eye contact. Eye contact is incredibly important. First of all, eye contact creates bonding between 2 individuals. There is a chemical that is emitted whenever we have eye contact with another person called oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone. And so when it comes to an interview, one of the things that you want to create is bonding with the other person. Unfortunately, whenever we feel anxiety, whenever we feel stress, one of the things that begins to suffer is our ability to look someone in the eye. And so therefore we want to make a special effort that whenever we are in conversation, that we are looking at them and not avoiding their eye gaze, because this will create an impression of connection, which is exactly what we want. The second area is our smile. Now, when we are nervous or feeling anxious, one of the things that begins to disappear very often is the smile. We begin to become very focused and we begin to be very serious. I remember I was working with a client recently who was preparing for a job interview. And one of the things that I noticed was that when they were relaxed, they had this wonderful, warm smile. It was so incredibly inviting. And then we began to explore and practice some of the potential questions that she might be asked in the interview. And all of a sudden, the demeanor of her face totally changed. The smile disappeared, and she became so focused, so concentrated on giving the right answer. Now, there's nothing wrong with being focused and this determination to have the right answer. The problem was the seriousness of her face created an impression that this person was not fun, that this person was not warm. And what I was missing was some of that incredible smile that they had. The third area is posture. Posture is one area where we signal to the world if we are confident or if we are not confident. And one of the ways we show up when we are not confident is the amount of space that our body takes up. When we lack confidence, it's almost as if our body becomes smaller. Think about it. Whenever you have a moment in your life, whenever you feel that the environment is against you, one of the things that we commonly do is that we begin to become smaller to protect ourselves. And so when we begin an interview and we walk into a room, or even if we're showing up virtually, and our body language is that I am nervous, that I'm not taking up the space, that I'm not confident, it gives the wrong impression. The fourth area is the handshake. Now, I'm assuming, of course, that we are back to normal, which we will be eventually. Throughout the pandemic, of course, this is something that has disappeared. And it'll be very interesting whenever we return to normal. Once again, we will be shaking people's hands, and we'll have to relearn, perhaps, the art of shaking hands. Because shaking hands is an art. And we can get ourselves into trouble with the wrong handshake. Now, there are two areas of handshake that really create a bad impression and are lingering to the other person. The first area is what I call the vice grip. Someone grabs your hand and they shake it and they hold it like a vice. And sometimes it can be even painful. And so that's not the impression we want to make, especially if you're shaking a woman's hand who's wearing jewelry. Very often when you crush their hand, that is a very painful experience. The other, of course, is the opposite. That is the failure to really grab the person's hand at all. It's kind of weak and it creates an impression that, the person's really not interested, they're detached. And then, of course, the final one is the wet hand, kind of like the wet fish. There's nothing worse than shaking a person's hand and then realizing that it's wet, and it just creates this lingering impression. So when it comes to the handshake, make sure that you're not making these common handshake mistakes that leave an impression that you really don't want to leave. The fifth area is our clothing. Our clothing creates an impression. Our clothing gives a signal. In nonverbal language, we use the word ornament to describe our clothing. And our clothing can create a mood. And so it's important for us to dress in clothing that helps create confidence within us. And so very often a mistake I see people making is that they wear clothing that is overly formal and doesn't fit well and creates a lack of confidence. I've seen so many candidates showing up in new shoes and they're almost crippled because the shoes are so uncomfortable and it distorts sometimes the way they walk. So please choose your wardrobe well and avoid clothing that doesn't make you comfortable. Before we move to the two final areas, I just want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, to press the bell when you'll be reminded of upcoming videos. Each week I produce a video which centers around the areas of communication, emotional intelligence, helping you be more confident both at work and at home. The sixth area is our closed body language. Now, I already mentioned that before in our posture as we enter, but as we're seated as well, it's incredibly important to have proper posture. When we're seated for an interview, at times what can happen is it's very easy to become smaller and to slouch. Now, one of the problems of this, of course, is that it gives the impression that we lack confidence. But the second area that it impacts greatly is the quality of our voice. You see, if a voice is going to resonate and be powerful, we need to be able to breathe properly and we need to have an open posture. This open posture helps the breath we're taking in reverberate and create a rich voice. So those two elements are incredibly important in our body language if our voice is to be at an optimal state. We need to be able to breathe, and so often whenever we're nervous, we're breathing very shallowly. So what we want to do is to breathe from our diaphragm to get more oxygen into our body, and then to have an open stance which will help in the quality of the voice. And that voice is important because it also connotes if we are nervous or if we're confident. And the final area of body language that we might want to avoid in our next job interview is our fidgeting. Now, fidgeting, of course, is nervous tension, but it also can be a habit that we're into. And very often, we can be unaware of these habits that we have. I remember I was working with a client a few years ago, and one of the things they did whenever they were doing presentations was that they would rattle coins in their pocket. And I said to them, you have this habit of rattling coins in your pocket. And they said to me, no, I don't. And I said, actually, you do. And they said, no, I don't. And I said, well, let's replay the video that I was just shooting. And so I replayed the video, and there he could see for the first time that this was a habit that he wasn't even aware of. And so when it comes to fidgeting, common things are that if we wear glasses, that we fidget with the glasses. If we have a pen, we can fidget with the pen. So try and avoid any fidgeting. Try and put some objects at a distance from us so that there's not the temptation to grab the pen or our glasses, because fidgeting connotes to the other person, this person's really nervous and they're not confident, and that's the last thing that we want to do. So there we have 7 different areas to explore when it comes to our body language that are incredibly important for creating the right impression and things to avoid in our next job interview. And if you've enjoyed this video, I invite you to explore the next video, which will look at 7 body language tips for your next job interview.